to the EPR Revenue viewers. Hello once again. We are still at the 7th EPR Annual Research Conference, where the theme is Economic Policy Measures to Enhance Productive Capacities post-Covid-19 crisis. As we have been sharing with many people experiences, what is this conference about? Today, we are still having more guests to present to you. So we are with Anna guest with us, and she's a woman with a good knowledge, and I think you will enjoy it.
Thank you. I'm Alice Anokur, and I'm the country director of OXFAM here in Rwanda, and I've been part of the panel in this 7th conference. Basically, the focus has been on enhancing productive capacities of Rwandan population. That's been our contribution post COVID. So after the COVID aftermath, after this pandemic, what are some of the measures and strategies that could be employed for faster and sustainable recovery?
Thank you very much. By mentioning that, I think as a woman you are, and also as knowledge as you are, I've been asking myself, for someone who wasn't there during the presentation, or maybe who didn't have the access on YouTube on your presentation, what was it about? In just a few words.
In a few words, I presented a summary, snippets of wide research that we've carried out over in different districts that assesses, right from the time COVID lockdown started, assessing the impact of COVID on women enterprises, generally on enterprises within the horticulture value chain, which is the area in which Oxfam is operating in Rwanda, and also assessing the impact that COVID has had on the smallholder farmer, and especially the women, and seeing what has COVID done as far as people's resilience and resilience to shocks, basically, and potentially what could be done to avert that in the future.
So, mentioning about the farmers, I've been thinking mostly on the country as Rwanda. Its economy is more reliant on farmers. And what were the impact on farmers' resilience vulnerability to extend these shocks vis-a-vis with this COVID-19?
So when COVID-19 measures came, and they were helpful for containing, thanks to the government for stringent measures, because from the conference we've had, one of the reasons the impact hasn't been worse than it has been is because of stringent measures that the governments have taken to contain it. It could have been worse, like in many other countries. But we saw from our work with the farmers that it disadvantaged them in terms of, so we work with women who are in cooperatives, who work together on a bigger, small, rather piece of land or plot, for example, in pineapple farming. So we work in the value chain right from the primary production level to value addition and with enterprises to marketing. So what COVID did, there was no freedom of movement, and therefore you could see from the video that they weren't able to go and weed their pineapples. That's one. They weren't able to take their pineapples or their vegetables to the market. That's two. And therefore they perished. That's three. And therefore they lost income. That's four. And so this effect on the farmer really pushed them back to poverty, and possibly that's part of the statistics of the huge number that we've seen of Rwandans sliding back into poverty due to COVID pandemic measures. And we saw that it's quite a big resilient group challenges are many, but we saw people go without food, maybe 1 meal a day. The survey has shown some had to sell their property, even at low price. Their food was sold at low price because they could not access the supply points. The collection centers were no longer working, and we saw that not only did their income go low, but also their actual food consumption went low, and also they could not raise the money they were raising before to take their children to school, much as school had also closed, but their produce was helping in between, paying for the health insurance, and paying for school fees and other needs. And you notice that when COVID hit, most of them being in the horticulture, even you prioritized what should I buy, what should I not buy in terms of food. Dry rations, what does it mean? You've cut out on vegetables. What does it mean? The price of vegetables has gone down. Oversupply and not meeting the demand, it's been quite something.
Speaking of farmers in generally, maybe it's becoming white, but maybe emphasizing on women aspect, as we are living in this patriarchal society. What were typically the challenges to women in horticulture as OXFAM is involved?
So thank you for that question. We did assess what's the impact of COVID-19 on women, and we found that the rate of GBV, gender-based violence, had gone high, and because we know that 33% of the violence happens within homes, by the people known, the perpetrators are known to the victims, it's the neighbors, and now because of the lockdown, and people had to spend longer time with their perpetrators, the GBV rate escalated. And unfortunately, much as most of our work has been also in creating awareness of the availability of services to gender-based violence victims at the Sange One-Stop Center, there was an issue of access. So reporting was difficult, it became low because access was difficult, transport, even to go there, privacy, when you come, where do you go, and that kind of thing. So we saw that COVID lockdown really had an impact on women and girls. We had a number of girls that were victims, teen mothers that had been enrolled on economic empowerment activities. They dropped out of school because of that. And even when they would come, they would get maybe a small transport allowance. They would split their allowance, or they walk all the way and make sure they buy milk for their children. So the parents were beginning to see that they're also contributing in caring for their children. Now they drop out of school and they are unable to even have that allowance that they can be able to translate. The hope there was shattered because of COVID-19, and with many risks, of course, and it does affect women different from men, and that's what we say, that when we're thinking about measures for post-COVID, we need to really have a gender lens and think about how is this economic recovery plan responsive to the women's specific needs. For example, the gender-based violence victims, how are they able to access? There is availability of the fund, but how are they able to access it? Are they aware of it? Because I'm talking of few districts where we work, and maybe we've talked about it, and they need to go and ask more about it. What's there? Especially people in the informal sector, it's really important to think about them as we think about post-COVID.
If the actors who were supposed at least to fight against this GBV high rate, is there any contribution, let me say, at the government level, or maybe this public or private sector, just to fight against this kind of?
In Rwanda, we're not short of the services, and that should be commended. commendable because you have Isange One-Stop Center in so many districts. And we work with 6 Isange One-Stop Centers, and part of our contribution is to enhance psychosocial support in service delivery to victims and to strengthen linkage between the Isange One-Stop Center and the communities, so they are more aware of the services existence, so creating demand for that service, so they report and they get the assistance they need, but also creating champions, identifying champions within the community who are also service providers, so they can be able to help these girls, these victims, to get the necessary service need. So having said that, there wasn't shortage of service as there was constraint in the service itself being delivered. So our recommendation would be gender-based violence response services must be considered as essential services during crisis, because that's when it escalates. So it should be considered as an essential service to ensure that there is access for those in most need, and that the response must remember that during crisis is when gender-based violence goes high.
Thank you very much. By curiosity, I would like to ask, what are really the opportunities of quick wins toward the presented pandemic COVID-19, as long as you did mention it in your presentation?
Thank you. Some of the quick wins, even from what I've mentioned, is that we must put on a gender lens in developing the national recovery plans, and we must ensure they are engendered to the extent that they are responsive to the needs of the most vulnerable, address those in most needs, because we've seen there's a good level of disbursement of the Economic Recovery Fund. However, big part is not because of the low demand, because of lack of awareness. Where there is awareness, lack of capacity to access because of stringent measures. So we need to make sure within the recovery fund there is provision for capacity strengthening to enhance access to that fund, especially by the poor women, farmers, and also by smallholder enterprises that are within the informal sector that maybe do not have, those tax returns they're asking for that they should have, the kind of registration that they should have, the audit of the last 3 years that they should have. It should be enabling and empowering so that those in most need it. That's one. Make it engendered. Two, the important sectors we're advocating for right now. We know that agriculture absorbs 70% of the employment in the country. That's majority of the people. Majority of them are in the rural area. And we are also seeing women and horticulture. The horticulture value chain must also be prioritized, not just to give a stimulus to the big timers that are known, already know how to access, even have alternative ways to access. But those who do not even know that they can be supported to recover. I'm not saying to the level of America and say everyone, but really there are those enterprises, small value chain enterprises that in agriculture, particularly in the agriculture value chain, horticulture. For instance, one of the value chains we support is the cassava leaves, Isombe. It provides service to about 2,000 women that their livelihoods depend on that, their lifeline. And imagine that you helped them recover and be able to get back to production, get back to their drying system and packaging and storage, and these collection centers are reactivated and women can take their cassava leaves because that's what they were depending on. So it's engendering the recovery plan. It is having the value chain in horticulture, but also financing, agriculture financing, very, very, very important, because part of the work OXFAM does is to support these small medium enterprises to be able to provide market to the smallholder family, its entire value chain. And we give both loan as well as a grant. And for them to be able to access loans from the bank, the interest rate is high. Thankfully, some of the private sector partners that have come along with us to appreciate the need for sustainability of also their business and the importance of supporting the value chain where most of the people are employed and who are the potential clients. They've been able to reduce discount. I know that they too are affected, but then somebody must invest within the system, within agriculture, to make sure that there is access to finance and that the means to access that fund are easy and known to benefit majority of the people that boost this economy's recovery.
I've been asking, after the presentation, at least there is some recommendations. So what would be the recommendation as long as OXFAM is concerned via the productive capacity in Rwanda in the aftermath of the COVID-19 crisis, just for its increase these productive capacities? What would be your recommendations?
I would recommend think sustainability, think long term. We have COVID here and we need a response during and post-COVID. And we know that the aftermath of COVID are long-term impacts, negative impacts and consequences. And therefore, in thinking about sustainability, the economic recovery plans must think of measures that are beyond just relief for the day, but that are talking about the very things we say. How is our agriculture finance? They're thinking about and how it can be able to accommodate. They're thinking about vaccination and how it can cut across the entire country. But also thinking sustainability means that these quick measures won't work. We are promoting agroecology, we are promoting organic farming, and we know that organic certification is expensive. It's long-term benefit. It's worthwhile investing in, and avoid just looking at the short term of today's food security. How about tomorrow? How about our children? Will they find soil? We have climate chaos. We have climate crisis. And if all soils are depleted and eroded and not sustainable means of agriculture, what's going to happen? So we think the Ministry of Agriculture should spearhead sustainable farming practices together with all other stakeholders, so that we know that it's not just food sufficiency and food adequacy, but that the resource on whom majority depend, the natural resource, the soils, are protected. We're also promoting clean energy. We've done pilots. All I was presenting is really, really small scale and minute when we talk about biogas as an alternative energy for the women to reduce unpaid care work, but also to reduce demand for cutting firewood. We're not able to cover the whole country, so we're saying, why not invest in those sustainable initiatives that are going to help save the environment, which is sustainability, but also increase the productive capacity of the women, because you reduce the time poverty that enables them to be active participants in the economic recovery and development of the country. So those are our key recommendations: sustainability, inclusion, financing, agriculture, and particularly we're promoting the agriculture value chain. So make sure that if your recovery plan is engendered and is thinking sustainability and is also looking at how you ensure finance and participation, that would be great. If you want a specific recommendation to really, really make sure there is inclusive participation of women, let's change this kind of discussion and dialogue where one lady out of so many is a participant. If you are in hint.
Yes.
Secondly, We have a partner, Rwanda Women's Network, and they work across the country with many women organizations that are part of this network. Bring them on the table when you're defining strategies for enhancing productive capacities, so that you have that gender lens and they can participate in defining that, because they hear the voices of the women, they've been part of it, of that process.
We would like to thank very much our guest of today. And as I've been mentioning, this YouTube channel we parent is where we get more knowledge, and mostly on economics, guys. This is a good opportunity to not miss. So please, if ever you just reach on our YouTube channel, don't forget to subscribe and just click that red bell ring for if ever there is new uploaded videos, for you to be the first one to get them. And after watching it, please don't forget to like. So thank you, madam. I think the next time maybe we'll be inviting you, will be available for another discussion as this one.
Sure, thank you, EPRN. Always available as OXFAM to partner with you, so that we can influence change for this country and globally through research. As OXFAM, we are evidence-based, partner-led, influencing country program, and we believe together with you will go far to influence economic policies that will make a difference for the poor.
Yes. As I have been mentioning, the presenter of today was Ajab Kone. So let us see the next time. Ciao, ciao.